He shoved the inn door open, and a child's ribbon slipped free from the central blanket, fluttering onto the wet flagstones as bodies on the pallets shifted and a hush ran through the room. Suspicion pulled at the traveler the way a loose stitch pulls on wool. He stepped inside and his eyes caught the strange, fresh dip on the mattress near the hearth. The immediate problem was plain. The inn had no private rooms, and every pallet was at least partly occupied. The stakes were simple and sharp. No bed of one's own meant shared warmth, shared watch, and shared danger. He tightened his cloak and moved toward the counter to claim the smallest, most practical piece of safety he could find. He had been on the road for a week, a lean man with a patched cloak and a satchel that smelled of damp linen. The traveler had a small scar on his cheek and calloused hands. He kept rubbing his hands together as he approached the innkeeper. Innkeeper, the traveler, voice low, any place to lie. The innkeeper looked over the ledger without meeting his eyes. Only pallets, the innkeeper said. One by the hearth is free enough, if you do not mind sharing. The traveler glanced past the counter. A young mother was dozing, a gruff drunken lodger snoring with his head back, and a child's blanket lay in a heap between them. The room smelled of peat smoke, wet wool, and the sour tang of beer. A knot of unease tightened at the traveler's ribs as he noticed the ribbon again, and he moved closer to see if the blanket had been disturbed. He saw a small indentation near the young mother's side that looked recent. The innkeeper watched him. We do what we must here. The innkeeper, we take turns keeping watch. The traveler heard the word watch and understood it would not be merely habit, but currency. He agreed to the pallet not from comfort but from calculation. Suspicion and a need for shelter guided him. He sat, placed his satchel by his boots, and accepted the economy at hand. They arranged the bodies close to the hearth with quiet, efficient gestures. The young mother shifted so her knees would not press against the drunken lodger. The drunken lodger grunted and forced a place for himself. A small old woman rose from a corner chair and produced a carved wooden token the size of a coin. She tapped it against the ledger on the counter, names and tokens. The old woman, ledger keeps the order. The traveler leaned in to read a line. The ledger showed entries, dates, and short notes about who had slept where. The traveler's finger traced a recent line. One entry had been crossed out. The traveler's unease moved into a sharper determination. He asked the innkeeper what the marks meant, that one left his edge alone last week. The innkeeper, voice flat, slept on his own against the wall. Woke alone, ledger shows a blank where his name was the next morning. The drunken lodger snorted. Strangers bring cold luck, he muttered. The young mother opened her eyes and put a hand over the space where her child had been sleeping. Not luck, she said. Choices. The room tightened with argument. The old woman held up the token. We trade warmth for company and watch. Tokens show who keeps what corner, who owes a turn. The traveler watched each face and calculated where safety and blame might settle. Short dialogue broke into fast, clipped lines as they negotiated turns and proximity. I will keep watch, the drunken lodger voice slurring. No, you won tea. The young mother quickly. My baby sleeps there. I will watch myself. Young mother, the innkeeper, we all do turns. Innkeeper, you tell us who goes now. The old woman. The conversation snapped like rope taut. The traveler kept silent, listening, watching small gestures. The drunken lodger's finger tapping a mug, the young mother's thumb fumbling the child's scarf, the innkeeper rubbing his forehead. Each gesture was part of the calculus of shared sleep. Who trusted whom, who was weak, who could be relied on to wake. An argument rose when someone said quietly that people sometimes woke to find a bed empty and a token left behind. You mean someone is taken? The drunken lodger, standing. Do not talk nonsense, the innkeeper answered. Innkeeper, tell us plainly, the old woman demanded. The innkeeper hesitated and then pulled a small ledger from beneath the counter, one with a rough new entry. He laid it where the traveler could see. The traveler read the line. A date, a name, and a single word: refused. He looked up. Refused what? The traveler. The innkeeper's jaw tightened. Refused the edge. Chose to sleep alone. The drunken lodger barked a laugh, and then stopped as the room stared back at him. The traveler felt doubt opening in his chest, and then a quick wash of anger, not at one person, but at the choice that had been called innocent until punished. He spoke only after a pause, voice low. Who decides where people sleep? The old woman answered with a thin smile and a finger tapping the ledger. We do. We barter an edge of blanket for a turn to rest. Tokens mark who holds watch. Ledger keeps the memory, and if someone will not trade the traveler, they may find that the world does not make room for them, the innkeeper. A small, practical scene followed as the young mother settled her child under the quilt and the drunken lodger shifted toward the hearth. The traveler placed his coat at the pallet's edge and lay down on his back, keeping his satchel between his knees like a barrier. He watched breath, listened to the fire, and felt the rhythm of other bodies. Sleep hovered at the edge of his eyes, but the suspicion that had met him at the door did not let him fall. He turned his head, noting the burn mark on the young mother's sleeve, the way the innkeeper's hands trembled when he wrote in the ledger. Each small detail suggested how fragile safety could be here. At some point near midnight, the room changed. Blankets shifted on their own as people turned. A new indentation deepened in the central bed. The traveler blinked awake to see the young mother's hand reach under the quilt and then come back empty. Her lips parted in a sound that was almost a cry. My child, she said, voice small. The drunken lodger sat up, eyes glassy. Where is she? He demanded. A quick search followed. Under pallets, behind barrels, down the back corridor. The inn emptied into focused action. The innkeeper shouted, search the lanes. Someone go to the mill road. Two men rose and left, boots scuffing the threshold. The traveler rose too and moved to the pallet edge. His body tensed into a protective stance. The room split into pairs and small groups. Search the corridor. The traveler sharply to a lad who had just woken. Traveler, you stay with the mother, the old woman. You should watch the hearth and the space left open. The traveler hesitated, then sat by the empty indentation and set his satchel like a wedge between the blankets. His hands trembled as he tightened a strap. He felt protectiveness slide into him, an action-driven impulse rather than speech. He placed the small carved token the old woman had shown him on the pallet beside the young mother's hand. When the searching men returned at dawn, they carried only a small scarf folded into a neat square. The innkeeper set it on the counter with his hand closed over it for a moment. Found on the hearth, one man said. Nobody saw beyond the lane. The young mother held the scarf and smelled it as if it might speak. My child used to lean on my sleeve and suck the thumb, she said. This smells like that thumb. Her voice hardened into a practical sadness. The old woman closed her fingers around the token. Ledger will say gone, she said. We mark and keep our turns squarier now. The traveler did not try to comfort with words. He pushed his satchel to his feet and stared at the ledger entries as if one more glance could change the line. Arguments broke into sharper exchanges. The drunken lodger pointed a finger. It is the stranger, he said. Travelers bring trouble. The traveler's jaw set. Drunken lodger, he replied. You slept near the door. Who watched your edge? The drunken lodger's face flushed. I did not expect. He started. Expectation does not feed a child. The young mother. The drunken lodger shot back. Do not tell me how to keep watch. The room turned loud then quiet, each voice a way to shift blame or to demand certainty. They spoke names often, steering accusation by naming people. The ledger held the pivot of the twist. The innkeeper, after a long pause, slid a folded scrap of paper toward the traveler and the young mother. This was tucked under the mat 2 nights ago. The innkeeper. He tapped the spot. The traveler unfolded the scrap and read 3 words. Do not edge. The traveler felt understanding snap into place. The twist changed the meaning of earlier gestures. What had looked like chance now wore evidence. The young mother pressed the scrap to her chest and then handed it to the innkeeper. "Who left it?" she asked. The innkeeper shook his head. That discovery shifted the room, smoothed from suspicion to urgent decision. Some men wanted to march the lanes and bring back the one who wrote the scrap. Others argued they should close the inn and demand protection from the town constable. The old woman spoke in a low, steady voice. "We have rules," she said. "Rules keep children safe when the cold is hard. Someone broke rules and a child is gone. We decide what to change." The traveler had been listening, and his feeling moved again, this time toward determination to guard what remained. He took the token from the old woman's hand and laid it on the ledger, and unasked, for offer to keep a corner that night. They made a bargain by dawn. The innkeeper arranged sleeping places to put the most vulnerable by the hearth and older men nearer the door where they could hear the road. "Traveler," the innkeeper, "you will keep the edge tonight. Watch the blank space. Wake anyone who moves." The traveler nodded. He accepted the task not with words, but by setting his satchel under his head and sitting bolt upright when the light failed. He listened to the rhythm of breathing and the small noises that mean living bodies. A child's snore, the scratch of a drawn blanket, the creak of a shifted stool. That night passed with taut silence. Twice the traveler rose to push back a blanket and check a pocket. He felt anger and a sharper, practical fear when distant steps sounded outside. He stood, cloak around his shoulders, and stepped to the threshold to peer into the lane. Nothing moved but the mist. Each time he checked, he returned and laid his hand on the ledger as if that would lend the record weight. He watched the young mother sleep and counted the small, visible signs of life. The rise of breath under the quilt, the child's fingers curled against a thumb, the old woman's slow, even breath in the chair. At dawn, the ledger looked different. Someone had added a shortened note, a mark beside several names. The innkeeper rubbed his eyes and pointed to the new mark. "We will make turns stricter," he said. "We will not leave edges bare." The young mother folded the child's scarf against her chest and stood. Her face had closed into a practical resolution. "Young mother, the traveler, what will you do?" She met his eyes with a direct look. "I will not give my child that solitary space again," she answered. She placed the scarf in the ledger as a small record, and then left the inn to go ask the constable to look the lanes. The innkeeper counted coins and made arrangements that were more like promises than plans. The old woman wrote a new rule into the ledger and carved another token. "One who refuses an edge pays, with a token taken from their goods," she said. "Or else they must sleep up against the wall and be watched for 3 nights. The room settled into a mournful, practical order. The traveler wiped his hands on his leggings and replaced his satchel. He felt a shift inside him from suspicion to a small acceptance that certain bargains, uneasy as they were, kept children warmer. He stood by the hearth and watched the young mother leave with the scarf pinned inside her cloak. Before he followed her into morning light, the innkeeper leaned close and said in a voice almost without lift, "Ledger keeps us honest." The traveler nodded and realized the ledger did more than record names. It enforced a system of mutual obligation. He threaded his fingers through the strap of his satchel and walked to the door, pausing to return the carved token to the old woman. "Keep watch," he said. She took it with a small, grave smile. Outside, the lane was wet with the thawing of frost. The traveler adjusted his cloak and followed the young mother at a discreet distance, watching the way she walked with the scarf folded inside her hand. He did not speak until she stopped at a low gate and turned. "Traveler," she said, voice blunt now, "do not presume you know me." He looked at her. "Young mother." "I presume nothing," he said, "but I will keep a space where your child slept." "That is enough for now." She nodded once and closed the gate. The chapter ends with a concrete, situational beat. The traveler returns to the inn and writes his name in the ledger beside a carved token. signing himself to the new bargain he had accepted during the night. He sets his satchel down, places the token on the line, and stabs the pen into the ledger. The pen makes a small scratch, very plain. The innkeeper closes the ledger and locks the counter. The ledger's new mark sits beside the traveller's name, binding him to a turn and to a small, uneasy peace that keeps the rest of the inn warm for another night. A rough hand shoved a shivering man into the muddy yard and pressed a small leather pouch into Bram's palm. Suspicion tightened the room. People stepped back from the stranger as if warmth might leak out with him. Whose pouch is this? Bram, holding the leather up where lantern light hit the stitches. The child's mother, Elsa, pointed and said, "Mine. My boy had these coins an hour ago." The accusation hung in the lamplit air. Theft was the immediate problem, and every face turned toward the stranger for an answer. The traveler remained near the gate, coat dripping with road water, watching the circle tighten. He had seen inn scenes before. He had seen pockets emptied in crowded rooms and bargains made by whisper. He had also shoved through this same door an hour earlier, remembering how a ribbon had slipped from the center blanket and fluttered away onto the flagstones. That image sat in his head as proof of how small things moved in such places. He kept quiet now because suspicion needed witnesses, not opinions. Bram's voice was flat. "Did you take it?" he said to the accused man. "Tell me now, or we'll have the law." The accused lifted his hands. He was thin, his clothes patched, and his eyes darted like someone who slept too little. "I did not," he said. "I slept by the hearth." I woke to the shout. His words were short. They landed on ears already sharpened by need. Voices rose. "He touched my fardel," said a tenant named Maeve. "He moved my bundle while I slept. You're a stranger." Another man said, "Strangers steal." The mother, Elsa, spat out each word like a splinter. "You took what my Thomas kept for bread." Bram pressed the pouch beneath a lantern and counted the coins with stiff fingers. The tally made the problem plain. Coins missing, a child who had lost them, and quick eyes that turned to the nearest outsider. The narrator watched, tone soft but steady, noting how a bare scarcity rearranged civility. Suspicion woke first. Doubt followed in the traveller's chest. He felt it as a small ache behind his ribs. He had no stake in Elsa's coins, but he recognized how often hungry rooms reached for a scapegoat. He moved closer to the doorway where the common room's warmth met the damp yard air. Inside, the common room smelled of wet wool and peat smoke. Tenants clustered on pallets, lanterns swung faintly. Bram lifted his chin, searched the pallets. He ordered, "Someone will have seen." Accused or not, the inn needed an answer. Tenants obeyed. They shuffled blankets, shoved aside straw, and muttered. The accused man followed, fingers raw from the chill. The traveler moved with them, not to find guilt, but to see how people measured truth under pressure. They found small things first. A cracked tin, a child's wooden top, a bit of ribbon half buried under straw. Each find stretched suspicion like a thread across the room. There Maeve, holding up a scrap of cloth. "He had this near him when I woke." The accused shook his head. "I found that at my pallet," he said. His voice was flat again. The traveler knelt, ran a finger along a set of damp footprints that cut across the straw toward the service door. A lantern search moved through the loft and narrow pallet rows. Men and women lifted slats of bedding by lamplight. The traveler carried a small lantern, its glass smeared, and followed a faint trail of wet prints. He did not announce himself. He kept to the edge of the search, watching the way hands shook when they examined another person's things. The prints led toward the service door, then stopped at a puddle where someone had tramped through mud. "Look here," he said, and held the lantern so Bram could see the prints. Bram leaned in. "They head toward the back gate," he said. His jaw set. "We will see where they go." Elsa came close, chest tight, fingers gripping the pouch as if the leather alone might guarantee the child's bread. "My Thomas will be frozen if he roams out," she said. She did not ask for help. She demanded a result with a voice that had the hard edge of a mother who had kept a child alive through lean months. They stepped outside again. Wind bit at faces, carrying the smell of river water. The traveler held the lantern low and saw a nail where a ribbon might snag. There, on the back gate, a torn ribbon clung to the iron and trembled. It matched the ribbon Elsa described. Close to the gate, reeds hid a damp bundle. Someone had tucked a scrap of fabric into the marsh, and inside it lay a small toy and a smear of fecal dirt. The sight shifted the room into a new fear. The child might not be where they'd last seen him. The crowd's tempers rose toward fear. He left him near the reed. A tenant shouted. Hands grabbed at one another. The accused man put out a hand to the bundle and closed it again, voice low. That is not mine. I swear. Bram took the bundle and unwrapped it with rough fingers. Inside was a small wooden top and a scrap of bread, no coins. Bram looked up. Where is the boy? He barked. Voices collided. Who last watched Thomas? Elsa demanded. You were nearest. Bram to a young tenant called Hall, who stood frozen by the gate. Hall. Elsa, fingers on his sleeve. Answer. Hall swallowed. I went to the well for water. I thought he slept. His voice cracked. I didn't to see him leave. The room tightened. An old tenant, Mags, crossed herself and muttered that if children wandered in the marsh at night, they did not come back warm. Confrontation in the yard sharpened into accusation. A tenant named Jory stepped forward. Face flushed! Hold him! Jory cried, pointing at the accused. He spun at the pallets where things go missing. The accused held his chin high. I have nothing to hide, he said. Let me be. Jory advanced. Bram, take him in. He'll show us where his things are hidden. The crowd edged in. Fists clenched. The traveler felt his doubt change to a different urgency. He could not watch a blow fall while a child's life hang, whether someone could stand guard at the hearth. He stepped forward. Wait, he said, voice steady. We should search the hearth and the pallets by the fire first. If the boy is ill, we need to warm him. Bram eyed him. You. Bram, you are a stranger too. The traveler shrugged a wet shoulder. If the child is cold, I will help find him. That is all. His hands rubbed together, not in guilt but for warmth. Bram nodded, half reluctant. He let a small party move back into the common room with lanterns. The accused went with them, guarded by two tenants. Elsa lingered at the yard's edge, clutching the pouch. Her breath came in small clouds. Please, she said to no one and to everyone, please bring him back. The narrator's voice, when it moved, was quiet, explaining how, in such rooms, fear and necessity remade enemies into helpers. The narrator did not force calm. He only noted how actions followed needs. In the midst of the search, a cough broke the pattern of motion. A small child who had been found under a pallet, Thomas, sat upright and spat blood into a cupped hand. The cough came again, wet and violent, and the room's anger fell apart. People froze, then leaned in. Elsa dropped the pouch and rushed to him. Thomas! She said, voice sharp with something that was no longer blame but raw panic. The traveler crouched, fingers on the child's forehead, feeling it flush with fever. Fear moved quickly through the room. Fear of contagion, fear of losing a child, fear of what a fever could take in crowded quarters. Bram barked orders that were urgent and stripped of accusation. Bring blankets, bring broth. Move them close to the hearth. Hands found blankets. Someone carried a blackened pot with thin broth. The accused man wheeled into helpfulness, carrying a ladle with a careful hand. He wasn't gentle by habit, but he moved with the practiced care of someone who had once warmed many a child. The crowd split its fury. A few insisted the accused still must be bound and handed to the law. We cannot let a thief walk free. Maeve, what then if he steals again? Bram answered with a curt shake. We will hold him until morning if we must. For now, warm the boy. The traveler saw hands slacken when children began to breathe more steadily. The accused handed a blanket to Elsa, not looking up. His action changed the room's tone. His single practical motion shifted suspicion toward a tentative truce. At the hearth, the child coughed less. Broth warmed his lips. Elsa pressed a damp cloth to his brow. Her hands trembled, then worked with steady motion. "Drink, Thomas," she said. "Drink slow." The narrator observed that shared need made people forget their accusations long enough to act. The traveler offered his cloak for a pillow. "Here," he said, "rest your head." He adjusted the blanket so Thomas' chin did not tilt, and so the child's breath did not tangle with the moist air. While the child warmed, Bram called for a careful recount of belongings again. The accused man stood to one side. "I will wait here by the hearth," he said. "I will not run." His words were simple. Mags muttered that the accused's choice to stay changed how people measured him. Maeve shifted her weight, uncertainty coloring her face. The room moved from immediate fury toward practical decisions. Who would watch the child? Who would mend torn clothes? Who would keep watch at the gate? The traveler found himself explaining quietly to Bram what he'd seen by the back gate. He spoke of damp prints and the snagged ribbon. He Bram about the damp bundle in the reeds. Bram listened, his jaw settling into lines that said he accepted the new facts. Then someone took the boy from the pallets and carried him by the reed. Bram slowly. Why would they hide him? Elsa looked up as if the question meant new danger. Who would take a child and not demand a ransom? She said. Voices argued short lines. Maybe smugglers took him to the boats. Jory offered. Maybe a traveler thought to keep him warm while he went to fetch help. Hal suggested. The accused, quiet until then, said, "I saw a woman by the river an hour ago, wrapped tight. She looked like she was putting things into a sack." Bram. What did she do with the child? The accused swallowed. "I do not know." She walked away toward the water. "I thought she had a babe already." The room swallowed the possibility and turned it into action. They organized a search party. Bram appointed Hall and Jory to check the riverbank. Maeve took charge of the loft. The accused agreed to lead a sweep of the lane in case someone had set off with the child. Elsa refused to leave Thomas, but Bram insisted she rest against the hearth so she could stay near him without standing in the cold. The traveler took a small written notice and a scrap of cord, staying near the front to keep watch on the gate and the road. Outside, the wind had shifted. The search on the riverbank found prints leading along the water's edge, and then stopping at a small jetty where a skiff was tied. There, someone had loosened the rope. Hal called out, "The knot's been cut." Jory looked down at a scrap of cloth snagged on a post, and breath hitched for a moment. "It's Thomas' ribbon." "Jory." The search party's pace quickened to a rush. The accused man ran with the others across wet planks, his boots slapping mud, voice coming out in short pants. "This way! This way!" They found a skiff a little above the jetty, half hidden by reeds. The oars were missing their pins. Someone had shoved it off the bank and then deserted it. A damp footprint led away from the jetty and vanished where reeds thickened. The traveler crouched and felt the mud with his finger. It held the pattern of small, wet feet and a larger boot. The pattern told a new story, not of theft for coin, but of someone moving a child, perhaps to hide him from cold or danger. In the common room, Thomas' cough slowed. Elsa slept in fits with her head against his shoulder. Bram sat with the pouch on his knees, turning the coins in the lamplight. He looked up when the search party returned. Jory and Hal came back with wet hems and reeds in their boots. "We found the skiff." "Jory." "No one there." The prints fade where the reeds thicken. Bram's face tightened. "So someone took him downstream," he said. Doubt shifted into a sticky, slower fear. Fear of what lay downriver. Fear of smugglers of cold water, of people who took children to trade. The accused man sank onto a pallet near the hearth, breathing hard. He had been accused and then he had helped. He let out a breath and sat with hands on his knees. "I did what I could," he said. "I did not steal coins." His voice was small among the clink of broth ladles. Practical decisions followed. Bram ordered that 2 men ready a skiff at first light to search downstream. He arranged for a message to be taken to the next market town. Elsa would stay with Thomas under watch. "We will not hand him over to the road if we can help it, Bram." We will find the child, or we will guard what remains until morning. The accused man volunteered to stay by the hearth through the night. Maeve found a spare blanket and laid it over him, not saying whether it was pity or caution. The narrator noted how necessity forced an uneasy alliance. People who had seconds before been ready to strike now shared broth from one pot, and flattened straw to make place for a child's small body. The traveller sat with his back to the wall and listened to sentences exchanged in low tones. Elsa thanked the accused man in a voice that was not a full forgiveness but recognition of the immediate help. Her hands trembled less when a second blanket warmed Thomas's legs. A minor twist arrived when Hall, searching a satchel found under one pallet, pulled out a scrap of paper bearing a merchant's mark. The mark matched the insignia on a cart that had been seen on the lane earlier that day. "This mark is from the fishmonger, by the quay, Hull. He had a cart near the lane at sunset." Bram stared at the scrap. Then someone with a cart could have carried the child. That detail pulled suspicion away from the stranger and toward a different possibility. A neighbor or passing cart that might have stopped by under cover of dusk. Voices argued in quick, clipped lines. "We must tell the fishmonger to come here," Maeve insisted. "We must find the cart owner, Jory." Bram moved to fetch a note for the quay. The accused man stood and offered to go with Hall to the quay when dawn broke. "I'll go," he said. "I want tea run." The traveller felt a small relief at the offer. The accused's decision to volunteer changed how others saw him. His willingness to act lowered a few shoulders. By dawn, the room had settled into a careful watchfulness. Thomas rested, eyes half closed. Elsa slept in short bursts, still clinging to the pouch. People ate thin porridge and kept speech low. The accused man sat near the hearth, hands idle, looking at the flames. Bram called out the names of those who would leave with the skiff, and the list of things to bring. The traveller tied a scrap of cord around his satchel and checked the strap. He had no real claim in this place, but he had a hand in the work to be done. Before they left, Bram called the accused forward. "You will ride with Hull and Jory to the quay," he said. "You will tell the quay what you saw." The accused nodded. His face was not clean of shame, but his voice was calm. "I will tell them everything I know," he said. Elsa came to him and pressed the pouch into his palm. "Hold this for Thomas," she said. "If you find him, give it back." He took the pouch with both hands and bowed slightly. "I will return it," he replied. The searchers filed out into a grey morning. The traveller followed to the gate with Bram and the accused man. He looked back once and saw the common room's hearth smoke curl through a small chimney. Elsa stood in the doorway for a moment, the pouch on her hip, and then she stepped inside to tend Thomas. The narrator closed the scene with an observation anchored in action. The room had turned accusation into a plan, and the plan now moved along the road toward the quay. The chapter ends with the skiff's oars lifting from the water at first light, Jory calling a short order, and the accused man gripping the pouch to his chest as Hull pushed the boat away from the shore. The traveller watched the boat's dark shape cut a thin wake. Bram stayed on the bank, hand raised until the boat was only a dark smudge, and then he turned to report the next steps to the tenants gathered by the hearth. The concrete choices had been made. Searchers sent downstream, a mother tending her feverish child, and a stranger who had been accused but now carried the single key to clearing his name and returning a small family's coin. That decision would set the course for the morning and the answers they would find downstream. A shadow moved at the edge of the pallet, and the traveller's hand shot out to catch a strap that had already slipped free. Suspicion rose in him before he checked his satchel. The leather was lighter where coin rolls used to sit. He pushed himself upright. A figure slipped toward the doorway with something tucked tight against their ribs. He grabbed for the figure and the pallet shifted. "Stop!" The traveller, voice low and sudden. The shout brought bodies up on the pallets. Footsteps creaked on the loft boards. The inn filled with immediate, plain danger. A missing pouch, a fleeing hand, a room that had shared trust now pierced by claim. They had been sleeping close that night. People pressed to pallets for warmth, a child's ribbon caught in the center of the shared blanket in the first chapter. And the traveler had taken his place near the hearth. The ribbon had fluttered onto the flagstones earlier. He remembered the small bright strip when he pushed through the inn door. That memory belonged to the house now. Bram had been handed a leather pouch at the yard's edge in the second chapter. The traveler had held that same leather under the lantern and turned it over in his palm. Tonight those moments collided. The traveler was the obvious defender of the stolen thing at first sight. He stepped toward the doorway and clipped the shoulder of a man who was already on the threshold. Hands up, Bram, the traveler. Bram's jaw tightened. I did not take it to steal. Bram, who else would carry a pouch out the door? The traveler. Bram kept his hands visible. I carried it to the cradle. The child has no coins but some weight, Bram. Voices rose around the hearth below. The innkeeper moved toward the stair. A traveler called, "Give it back." You put hands on other people's things, the room demanded an answer. The missing pouch was now the center of motion and accusation. Suspicion had already done its work. Choices had to follow. The traveler followed Bram down the narrow stair. He kept his voice low but sharp. "Bram, where did you put the pouch?" Bram turned his head slowly. Under the shawl by the cradle, he touched the corner of his own patched cloak. They reached the common room. Lantern light jutted into the dark from the hearth. The child's mother lifted the frayed shawl and laid her fingers flat. She did not smile. Her hands were quick and direct. When she revealed the pouch, several people leaned forward. The innkeeper, why is a man's coin under that cradle? Who took it? The rough stranger, first seen as a pushing presence in the yard, had returned by then, collar dark against the doorway. He moved toward the cradle with an intent that made the traveler step forward. "That coin's mine." The rough stranger. The child's mother held the pouch in both hands. "It wasn't tea in my cradle when I wrapped her, sir," she said. Accusation spread like a single bright ember. The traveler's hands clenched. He remembered Bram's face under the stair, the way Bram's palms had gone white when the leather had changed hands earlier. The traveler's suspicion shifted into anger, then into a different shape. He wanted the child safe. The innkeeper's voice filled the space between them. "We done, tea have room for a fight." "Bram, tell us plainly why the pouch was in your hand earlier." The innkeeper's tone was practical rather than moral. He set the hearth poker down to catch the room's attention. "Bram, a stranger shoved me." He shoved a man into the yard and pressed the pouch at me. He looked like he would throw it away. I took it to keep it from being lost or used to buy one more drink. Bram's words came small and quick. The rough stranger spat on the floor. "He stole from me in the road." The rough stranger. "He took my pouch while I slept at the inn last week." "Give it back." The traveler's mouth opened. "Bram," he said, "did you take it from an asleep man?" Bram met his eyes. "I took it from a man who smelled of ale and could not wake. I put it to the cradle where small hands would not find it on their own." His fingers fiddled with the cuff of his sleeve. A traveler near the door laughed once, sharp, "So we have a new law now. Thief equals guardian." Someone else shouted, "Put it on the table, and let us see." The demand made movement. The innkeeper pushed a bench aside with one foot, and the table scraped. The pouch lay on the table and someone tilted the lantern. The stitches along the leather glinted. The traveler reached out and opened the pouch with a quick, careful motion. Inside were a few copper pieces, 2 folded scraps of paper with names, and a thin coin wrapped in cloth. "That coin's for bread," the child's mother said. "My girl got sick last week. I hid what I could." She kept her voice small, which made people listen. The innkeeper read the scraps. One scrap bore the name of a distant cousin. The other was a list of ration trades. The traveler felt the room rearrange itself around new facts. Doubt slid into the traveler then. Had he assumed theft because of a shifting strap? Had Bram intended to steal? Bram's hands did not appear free of guilt, but they did not appear cruel either. Outside, the wind lifted for a moment and smacked rain against the window. An external sound, a knock, came at the outer door, then stopped. People turned. The innkeeper crossed the room and opened the door a crack to listen. No one entered. The pause tightened, focus back to the pouch. Bram's voice broke a thin way through the hush. I moved it because I could not leave a child's coin in a corner where rats would find it or a hand might slit the stitches. I kept thinking of the ribbon that fell earlier. Small things get lost here, and a mother needs what she can save. He looked at the child's mother. The mother stepped forward. Bram, why did you not say so when the traveler questioned you? She asked. Bram stared at his boots. I thought there would be shouting. I feared the stranger would take it back by force. I thought to hide it with what I had, the cradle cloth, so the child would wake to it, not to a fight. His speech was quick, breathy. The traveler's posture changed. His suspicion loosened into consideration. He spoke with a shorter tone. Bram, if you were keeping it for the child, why did the stranger say it was his? He the same of other pouches until men knocked him from coin to coin, said the innkeeper. He has a temper, and he has men who back him. The rough stranger did not wait for more. He came forward and set both hands on the table with flat palms. He will not hold what I name mine. Bram, give it back now. The child's mother stepped between them. No, she said plainly, it is here now. I will not have him take it. She gripped the pouch and held it closer to her chest. The room split into small groups. Some pressed the rough stranger's claim. Others watched Bram with the kind of attention that keeps a secret from leaving a body. The traveler moved to stand at the mother's shoulder. His body said the decision he would make. We settle by talk. The innkeeper, not by arms. Sit, all of you. We will speak and then we will act. He pointed to shifted benches. He wanted order rather than violence. Violence would make the inn empty and the child smaller. They argued in short bursts. The rough stranger's voice grew clipped. He took my coin in the night. I ask what is mine, Bram replied. You pushed a man when he could not stand. You offered the pouch like a dare, the innkeeper for names of witnesses. People named few things and more small hesitations. At one point the traveler leaned into Bram. Tell me plainly. Did you steal out of malice? Bram's eyes went to the child's mother. No malice. It was sheltering. I thought of the child and the ribbon and the way folk lose what they cannot watch. I kept it where hands smaller than mine would not reach it. I meant to give it to her, not to hide it for my own use. He spoke quickly. That claim created the first real split among the travelers. One man, Thomas, said, a man who takes for charity may steal by another name. Another woman, Ellen, shook her head. Sometimes you must take a thing from a reckless hand to protect the weak. Bram did what my mother would do. Conversation braided into quick, near argument lines. The structure was short, clipped, and practical. People did not parade feelings, they named outcomes. As talk lengthened, an external sound rose. A child began to cry outside the common room, thin and urgent. The sound pulled the mother's hands to her child's cheek and made silence fall. The crying child was the immediate fact that pushed decision forward. The innkeeper tapped the table. We will examine the cloth and the pouch. If the pouch's owner proves it is his, we will return it and add 2 blankets in compensation from the house. If it belongs to the child by receipt or note, we will keep it. Simple. He looked at the rough stranger, and if you press with force. The traveler. The rough stranger's face hardened. Then I will take it by force. That threat narrowed the options. The traveler put a hand on the traveler's satchel, steadying himself with a small physical gesture. Suspicion had shifted again in the room. People weighed force against quiet order. Bram reached for the pouch and opened the thin coin wrap. He showed the folded paper with a name on it, and the ration list. Names travel with things. Read them. See who kept this account. He handed the paper to the innkeeper. The innkeeper read. His finger moved along the small, neat script. He nodded once. This paper is in the child's mother's hand. I saw that handwriting on the cloth she mends to sell. He looked up. That means this likely belonged to her. The rough stranger spat again and stepped back. You cannot make a woman tell me her own things. Ellen, if it is her writing, show proof of what you claim. The traveler watched the stranger's jaw. He let a silence hang a single beat and then asked, Who knows this man who claims it? Is he known for fairness? Thomas answered, He takes coin when men nap. He keeps others quiet by threat. He is named by some as a bully. The traveler tightened his mouth. Then we cannot hand it to him. Not without a clearer claim, he stood flat, making a small, deliberate posture that said he would not let the rough stranger take a child's saving by threat. The rough stranger's face changed. He stepped toward the cradle. The child's mother put both hands out. Do not touch my child, she said. The traveler met the rough stranger at the bedline and did not speak. He simply moved his body between the rough stranger and the cradle. The rough stranger shoved the traveler. The traveler pushed back. The shove turned into a grab. Hands found wrists. A blanket slipped loose. Near violence filled the tight space. At the hearth, side bed. Get off him! Bram yelled. Bram, stay back. The innkeeper warned. He stepped between them, catching the traveler's arm and the rough stranger's sleeve. The struggle became the chapter's peak. The rough stranger reached across the low bed toward the cradle. The traveler stepped into his reach, catching the man's wrist. The rough stranger twisted and tried to wrench free. The child's mother shrieked and thrust her body forward. Someone else yanked at the rough stranger's cloak. There was a sudden, sharp exchange of lines. Let go. The rough stranger barked, let go of the child. The traveler, Bram, stopped pulling. The innkeeper called, you had no right. The rough stranger, you had no right to take what you named by threat. The traveler answered. That quick back and forth pushed voices to a close and hands to a test. The traveler's protective posture did the crucial work. It put distance between the rough stranger and the child. The innkeeper, Thomas, and Ellen moved in with deliberate steps. They separated arms and bodies, catching clumsy motions before they became worse. The innkeeper placed the pouch on the table and held up the lantern so all could see. He set a blanket over the pouch and then pulled it back. We will not spill blood over coins tonight, he said. The rough stranger's chest heaved. He spat once, then stepped back and said, I will leave this place. Keep it if you want. He turned and left, boots slapping wood. The door closed. The room settled with the sound like a breath released. The child's mother pressed the pouch to the cradle and smoothed the cloth. Bram sank to a bench and folded his hands. Dawn found men and women moving to replace blankets and shift pallets. The innkeeper brokered a settled order. He took 4 of the inn's spare blankets and handed them to the mother and to Bram and the traveler. The house pays its share when it must. The pouch's contents will stay with the child until the mother wants otherwise. The man who left is not welcome to return with force. If he does, we will answer together. He finished the sentence with a practical nod. The traveler spoke to Bram in a quieter tone. You could have told me. You hid it because you feared taking the noise of accusation would burn the child. You acted to protect, but you must say plainly next time. People will not guess your mercy. His voice had a steady softness. Bram looked up. I was afraid the stranger would take it back and worse. I thought hiding it was safer than asking. He rubbed his thumb along a scar on his palm. The child's mother fastened the pouch to the cradle's rail with a strip of cloth that had once been a sleeve. Leave it here for now, she said, and the words were both command and relief. She looked at Bram. You brought it back to her. I will keep it safe. Her hands were steady. The traveler moved to the door and paused. He took Cook in the wet lane outside. The ribbon he had seen earlier still stuck to a splinter of wood by the stoop, a small bright strip caught by grit. He thought of the pouch under the cradle and the choices that had pushed people to the brink. He pressed his fingers to the worn leather of his own satchel. The innkeeper counted coins at the table and then closed the little ledger. He met the traveler's eyes. Night brings need. We do what keeps the place full. People sleep in shared beds because it keeps children alive and travelers whole. Sometimes that means we move coins without asking and call it protection. Sometimes it means we fight in the dark and then sit together in the dawn. We are not clean. We are necessary. His voice was plain. Bram stood and picked up the blanket the innkeeper had given him. He placed it over his shoulders and then, with a small, deliberate motion, wrapped the shawl tighter around the cradle's edge. "Keep it close," he said. "I will watch the door until you are sure." He moved to the threshold and took a slow position by the window. Ellen and Thomas shared a small exchange as they folded a pallet. "He will not come back tonight, Ellen." Thomas shrugged. "Men like that test a room and then move on if it answers. We must be the answer next time." The traveler returned to his pallet and sat. He did not lie down at once. He smoothed the shared blanket where the child's ribbon had been, and then set his satchel closer to his elbow. He watched the child's mother tuck the pouch beneath the cradle and heard the small sweep of cloth on wood. The innkeeper closed the door and turned the key. He did not lock it with anger. He locked it with calculation. The traveler felt a small, practical relief at the sound. The innkeeper put a kettle over the hearth and poured a cup for the child's mother, "For warm hands at dawn," he said. They ate a small piece of bread together at the table. The traveler nothing more than a few plain lines about the road and the weather. Bram sat with his head bowed and spoke only when asked. The child's mother hummed a short tune as she mended cloth and kept the pouch in sight. By the time the light spread pale through the window, decisions had settled into habits. The pouch stayed with the child. Bram had not been banished. He had been asked to watch and to learn to speak first. The rough stranger had left, and the innkeeper had drawn a boundary that travelers respected. The traveler tightened the strap on his satchel and rose. Before leaving, the traveler bent and touched the cradle's rail where the pouch lay. The child's mother met his hand and said, "If you see him on the road, tell me. I have bread if you stop on hunger." She offered the pouch small toward him with 2 fingers, not to take, but to show trust. "I will watch for him." The traveler, "I will tell you when I see him." He stepped out into a lane washed by early rain. He saw the ribbon pinned to the stoop and lifted it gently with 2 fingers. He held it a moment and then tied it to his satchel strap. It was a small, visible thing to carry, proof of the night's happenings and proof of what had been kept. The traveler walked on, slow, with the satchel close and the ribbon catching on his cloak. Back in the inn, the child's mother smoothed the blanket over her sleeping child and tucked the pouch deeper under the cradle rail. Bram collected a cup and set it by the hearth for the innkeeper. Ellen folded the last pallet and placed it with care. The innkeeper wrote a brief note in his ledger. "Blankets given, pouch kept, man left." He closed the book. The room returned to ordinary rhythms. People who had argued now mended torn hems and stacked plates. The traveler's action to stand between the rough stranger and the child had changed the night's arc. Bram's choice to hide the pouch had changed the direction of suspicion. The child would keep the coins until the mother decided otherwise. The final concrete choice came as the doorway opened once more. A courier from the next village stepped inside, wet and wind-burned, and handed a small wrapped parcel to the innkeeper, "A note for the child's mother," the courier said. The innkeeper passed the parcel across the table. The child's mother unwrapped a thin loaf, a small cured cheese, and a short note. An aunt in the next township had sent help after hearing a passing traveler speak of a sick child. She read the note aloud, voice small and steady. She says, "Bring the child north in 2 days if you can spare the road. She will take the pouch into her care if we cannot travel." Bram stood and placed his hand flat on the table. Then I will go with them to carry the child if they ask. I will not hide then. I will walk and help where it is needed." His voice was steady. His earlier fear had become a concrete offer. The traveler looked at Bram and nodded. "If you go, I will find the road with you. I will not leave a child there." The child's mother folded the note and tucked it into the pouch for safekeeping. She lifted the pouch and drove the strip of cloth through its loop. She tied the cloth to the cradle, then spoke with a short, plain sentence. "Keep what you must. Take what you can carry. I will leave the pouch with those who will travel for the child's good." She put the pouch under the cradle again, then reached out and smoothed Bram's sleeve. The innkeeper lifted his hand and rapped the table once to end the conversation. "We will ride as helpers if they ask. The house will take what it can afford and put it toward the road." He pushed the ledger closed with the casual motion of someone who had kept many small accounts. The traveler stepped to the door, then turned and looked back once. The child's mother met his gaze and gave a short nod. Bram had already begun to wrap a spare blanket around his shoulders. The innkeeper had written one more line in his book and slid it into the shelf. The last image of the night was simple and concrete. The child's mother smoothing the shawl over the cradle, the pouch tucked beneath the rail, a strip of cloth looped through its strap, Bram gathering his blanket, and the traveler taking the ribbon from his satchel strap to fold into his palm. The innkeeper blew out one small lamp and left the hearth slower glow to settle the room. The chapter closed with the child's mother saying, "Keep it here until morning, then decide." She placed the pouch under the cradle with fingers that did not tremble, tied the cloth twice, and then sat with the child pressed close.